Zemco, bringing tomorrow's technology to today's transportation. Cruise controls, driving computers, security systems, convenience electronics, performance electronics, navigation systems, electronic instrumentation. Zemco. The ZT-12 Cruise Control, an advanced system designed for driving comfort, convenience, and safety. This videotape will show you how the ZT-12 Cruise Control works and how to install and operate the system. Before we start the installation, let's take a look at how the system works. The command module is the system control. It is designed to look and mount like original equipment. The command module turns the cruise control on and off, sets the cruise speed, and increases or decreases the speed setting. The command module also signals the system to resume speed after braking. The throttle actuator houses a specialized computer which monitors current road conditions. Twice every second, it analyzes speed conditions and adjusts the throttle to keep speed constant. The throttle actuator efficiently controls the carburetor settings by using vacuum from the intake manifold. The magnetic speed sensor constantly measures the vehicle's speed through the use of magnets attached to the drive shaft. The ignition speed sensor reads pulses from the ignition coil to calculate speed. This is optional on some models. The brake disengage safety feature shuts off the cruise control. When you want to disengage the system, simply tap the brake pedal. Years of engineering and computer technology have made the Zemco ZT-12 Cruise Control extremely simple to install. This video installation guide has been created by Zemco to provide you with professional tips and to highlight key installation points. The ZT-12 command module can be mounted on the turn signal arm end, piggybacked on the turn signal arm, or attached directly to either side of the steering column. The ZT-12 also has a unique design for convenient placement on the dash or console. The mounting stand is reversible, so you can attach the command module where it's best for you. All the necessary hardware is included. The throttle actuator is usually mounted on the driver's side. The best places to mount the throttle actuator are on the inner fender, the strut housing, or shock tower. Avoid mounting the throttle actuator directly to the firewall because sometimes the normal operation of the actuator can be heard inside the passenger compartment. Stay away from pulleys and from excessive heat, taking special care not to mount the actuator near the exhaust manifold. Before you drill, make sure that the cable can reach the carburetor easily. The cable should have a gentle curve. If the bend is too severe, the cable may bind or lock up. When mounting, it is best to use 2 screws on opposing sides. However, if you have to mount on a rounded surface, 2 screws on the same side will work just fine. Check before you drill to be certain you aren't drilling into important hoses, wiring, or other components. Drill 3/16-inch holes and mount using the 1/4 by 3/4 inch sheet metal screws provided. The Zemco Cruise Control has been preset at the factory. However, some adjustments can be made on the back of the throttle actuator. If you have to mount the throttle actuator so the adjustments are in a hard-to-reach area, then leave it loosely mounted or unattached. After a road test and adjustment, it can be tightened down. There are many possible ways to attach the throttle actuator cable to the carburetor, but these basics always apply. When the cable is attached, the carburetor position needs to be at the hot idle setting. The bead chain must be tight, like this, not slack, like this. There can be no movement of the cable housing where it's anchored near the carburetor. If there is movement, you will lose the pulling action of the throttle actuator, and the cruise control may surge. The cable must not rub against metal parts, otherwise it will fray or affect operation. The cable should pull on the throttle in a straight line, or at maximum, be within 20 degrees of the throttle pull. Be extremely careful about the cable getting bound up in the carburetor linkage. Watch the actual operation of the linkage several times. Double check this to be certain no binding can occur. If the carburetor linkage binds, it can be dangerous to you and your car. There are various ways of hooking up the actuator cable to the carburetor. Here are some different examples. Snap-on throttle arm. Wire loop to carburetor pulley. Ford linkage adapter. 3-bead connector. If you're using the existing throttle cable housing to secure the actuator cable, then mount the actuator cable right next to the existing throttle cable's anchor point. Otherwise, you will lose pulling action. If you decide to use the P-clamp and L-mount bracket to secure the actuator cable, modify the L bracket as needed and mount securely. Check to see that there is no movement at the P-clamp and that the actuator cable can operate smoothly. If it's difficult to attach the actuator cable to the carburetor, you can pull the actuator cable through the firewall and attach the cable directly to the top of the accelerator pedal. In order to operate, the throttle actuator must have a constant vacuum source. Poor vacuum will cause poor performance. The best way to locate a constant vacuum is to go right to the intake manifold. Another method is to tap into the power brake booster hose between the engine and the check valve. The power brake booster hose usually comes right off of the intake manifold. In some cases, you'll find a junction block coming off the intake manifold where the power brake line is connected. That is a good source as well. When connecting the vacuum hose, stay away from PCV valves, multiple ported vacuum switches, smog control devices. These do not have a constant vacuum source. Without constant vacuum, there won't be constant pull from the actuator to the carburetor, and you cannot maintain constant speed. Once you find the right hose, cut it and install the correct size vacuum T supplied. Connect it to the throttle actuator. If you have a diesel, make sure your car has an auxiliary vacuum pump. There are several different types of speed sensing which can be selected according to the type of transmission and vehicle you have. Ignition coil speed sensing is the easiest to install and should always be used on cars with manual transmissions. This speed sensing method uses pulses from the ignition coil to send speed information back to the computer. Magnetic speed sensing uses magnets that are attached directly to the drive shaft or half shaft for front-wheel drive. As the shaft turns, the magnets generate pulses at the speed sensor, which sends speed information back to the computer. If your car has an automatic transmission or a diesel engine, you will need to use magnetic speed sensing. There is an alternative method to magnetic speed sensing. It's called a speed pulse generator. It uses the speedometer cable to generate speed sensing information. The speed pulse generator can be purchased as an option for your cruise control. Just contact your dealer or Zemco. First, let's look at ignition coil speed sensing. On manual transmissions, attach the yellow wire from the wire harness to the negative side of the coil, usually labeled negative or tack. If it isn't labeled, find a source that would operate a tachometer or RPM meter. An added safety feature of ignition coil speed sensing is ECS, electronic clutch switch, which protects the engine from over-revving by disengaging the cruise control if the clutch is depressed. This is standard protection on the ZT-12. If your car has an automatic transmission or a diesel engine, you will need to install the magnetic speed sensor. Before working under your car, always place your car on level ground. Apply the parking brake. Block the opposing wheels. Follow your vehicle owner's manual for proper jacking procedure. And use 2 jack stands. Never, under any circumstances, use the jack alone to support your car while working underneath. Before placing the magnets on the drive shaft, make sure there is enough space to install the speed coil bracket. Place the magnets opposite each other using double stick tape. Next, wrap the magnets with 2 strands of wire and twist the ends together with a pair of pliers. To ensure a permanent mount, twist the wire ends around the opposite wire to take out the slack. Never use tape alone, since heat and centrifugal force will throw the magnets off the drive shaft. On rear-wheel drive, position the magnets within 12 inches of the front U-joint. Use 2 magnets. The speed coil should be positioned to the side, not from the top or from the bottom, because the drive shaft will move up and down. On any car, the distance between the magnet and the speed coil should not exceed 3/8 of an inch. This distance is important for proper cruise control performance. On front-wheel drive, position the magnets as close to the transaxle as possible, usually on the hub, leaving enough space to install the speed coil bracket. Use 4 magnets. If necessary because of axle design, 3 magnets can be used. Since the transaxle does not move up and down on front-wheel drive, you can mount the speed coil bracket on top or to the side. Mount the speed coil securely so it doesn't vibrate or move around, because that can cause speed fluctuations and unsatisfactory performance. Before drilling holes for the speed sensor bracket, again, look and find out what you might be drilling into. Use the 1/4 by 3/4 inch sheet metal screws provided. Here is the wiring harness connection procedure, step by step. Before you start, make sure your ignition key is in the off position. Connect the wire harness to the rear of the throttle actuator. Connect the green ground wire to the car body or chassis, making sure there is no paint in between the connection. Another good ground point is the negative side of the battery. Check your connection, because a bad ground can cause erratic operation. If you've decided to use ignition speed sensing, attach the yellow wire to the negative or tack side of the ignition coil. Tie the black wire pair out of the way, since it is used only for magnetic speed sensing. If you're using magnetic speed sensing, run the black wire pair to the magnetic speed sensor, staying at least 8 inches away from battery cables, coil wires, or spark plug wires. Electrical interference can be picked up through these black speed sensor wires and cause the cruise control to surge. The black wire pair can be connected to either terminal of the magnetic speed sensor. Tie the yellow wire out of the way, since it is used only for ignition speed sensing. Find a hole in the firewall, like the speedometer cable hole, and route the command module wires and the brown brake light switch wires into the passenger compartment. Or drill a 1/2 inch hole in the firewall, install the rubber grommet provided, and then route the wires into the passenger compartment. The grommet is important because it protects the wires from being cut or damaged. Next, run the 2 brown wires to the existing vehicle brake light switch. There may be more than 2 wires coming out of the brake light switch, but we're looking for 2 specific wires. One wire that has a constant 12 volts, and another wire that will have 12 volts only when you press the brake pedal. When you press the brake pedal, the brake light switch turns on the brake lights. Again, we're looking for 12 volts constant and 12 volts when the brake is pressed. Once you find these 2 connection points, it does not matter in which direction the brown wires are attached. Use Scotch locks to connect the brown wires to the brake light switch wires. Use sufficient pressure with the pliers when crimping the Scotch locks to ensure a good connection. If the brake light switch wires are not installed properly, the cruise control will not work. This is an important safety feature, and this step should be performed with extra care. The next step is to locate a switched 12-volt source. By switched, we mean that you will have 12 volts only when the ignition key is in the on position. A good place to start is the fuse box. Follow the wiring coming out of the fuse box and locate a switched 12-volt source with a test light. To check your source, turn the key on and off. If the test light goes on and off, that is the 12-volt source. Connect the orange wire to the switched 12-volt source by using a Scotch lock. Before connecting the wire harness, make sure the key is off. Match and insert the colored wires from the command module into the 5-pin connector. Match and insert the colored wires from the wire harness into the 5-pin connector that has the orange wire already connected. Plug the 2 connectors together. You have now finished the initial installation, but take a moment to go back and check each of the connections and the parts which you've installed. If everything looks okay, then it's time to set some adjustments and then road test. Before you road test, you'll need to set some adjustments on the back of the throttle actuator. Make the adjustments only when the key is off. First, find the speed sensor switch and set to TAC for ignition coil speed sensing, drive if magnets were installed on the drive shaft, cable if you've installed a speed pulse generator, or FWD for front-wheel drive applications with magnets only. If your car has 3 or 4 cylinders, slide the switch to the 3-4 position. If your car has 5, 6, or 8 cylinders, slide the switch to the 6-8 position. Use the operations guide card to learn how your new cruise control works. It's time for a road test. First, turn the cruise control on. Then bring the car up to cruising speed. At 50 miles per hour, we'll set speed. You can see that the cruise control is holding steady. To increase your speed, hold in the Set Accel button. Let off and it will set. In addition to the constant accel, we can also tap up 1 mile per hour with each tap. To decel, we can tap down 1 mile per hour or disengage the cruise control through the brake. After braking, you can return to your former speed by pressing Resume. To coast, turn the cruise control off. To return to your cruising speed, turn the cruise control back on and push Resume. Your Zemco Cruise Control has been factory preset for optimum performance. We find that further adjustment is often not necessary. However, if you do need further adjustment, first double check that there is no slack in the bead chain and that the throttle actuator cable has a secure anchor point. Next, check for correct vacuum. If the bead chain and the vacuum are correct, you may have to adjust the sensitivity. First, test for proper cruise control engagement setting. Turn the cruise control on and accelerate the car to between 45 and 55 miles per hour. Press the set button once and slowly remove your foot from the gas pedal. The cruise control should engage smoothly and maintain a steady speed. However, if the cruise control loses speed or is sluggish, increase the sensitivity by turning clockwise. If the cruise control gains speed or surges, turn the sensitivity down counterclockwise. Do the adjusting slowly, 1/16 to 1/8 turn at a time. There is a field tester that will test the cruise control in the vehicle. Just disconnect the wire harness at the back of the throttle actuator and plug it into the tester. The tester can quickly and easily identify potential problems with the installation. Check with your dealer or contact Zemco's Technical Services Department for tester availability. Have fun with your installation and enjoy the economy of operation, drivability, and convenience that only a Zemco Cruise Control can give.